Leader of pro-MPP vigilante group Invincible Forces says efforts to disband political party security units such as his would succeed only if the police would demonstrate objectivity and neutrality in their dealings. Nana Jiman's comments follow repeated calls from individuals and organizations, including the Shanti Region Peace Council, to disband party vigilantes, and comes after last Friday's attack by another MPP vigilante group, Delta Force, on Ashanti Regional Security Liaison George Ajay. Nana Jemine tells Lava Firm's David Akwete the emergence of the Invincible Forces and other groups is the direct result of the unfair treatment meted out to opposition parties by the police service.
A baby ba or the mrana a shedding some. Me kasa amagana, min kasa ma party bia. The mrana or the shedding some no. Police force.
This question should be put to our leaders. Governments in power always use the police to their undue advantage. This forces the opposition to form vigilante groups. If we are to speak the truth, I agree these groups should be disbanded. If we know, for instance, elections will be transparent, what is the need to protect a ballot box? If all political parties come together and leave everything to the police, it can help, but such agreements will not work.
Meanwhile, the Invincible Forces leader wants police to beef up security at the Regional Coordinating Council premises as the party leadership tries to resolve the problem.
Police for form, Yanfeni Amo. Yes, you buse police for Omunagana, a showman say Bupa into Omunia Monfant.
We plead to all, including the police, for forgiveness over the incident. They managed the situation well. At least no deaths were recorded. But they have to increase the number of security personnel at the area. The Coordinating Council is a government property and should be protected.
When the Bessensa Omunos or Onokrana and yes, any panya chance you row easy, sir. And then a police for no. Now they back condemn or Mukakra.
Well, a research fellow at the Institute of Democratic Governance, Dr. Kwesi Jonah, has revealed that about 75% of vigilante groups in Ghana are concentrated in the northern regional capital, Tamale. He says these vigilante groups identify with the two major political parties in Ghana, that is the ruling New Patriotic Party and the National Democratic Congress.
Dr. Kwesi Jonah disclosed this at the post-election stakeholder review workshop on the 2016 presidential and parliamentary elections at Adan. The three-day stakeholder workshop centered on challenges experienced before, during, and after the election. Successes and lessons would also be shared by several stakeholders, including civil society organizations, electoral commission, political parties, the media, police, among others.
The nature of the vigilante groups says that, one, they are within the two main parties. Two, 75% of them were concentrated in one metropolitan area, Tamale. Three, it is not always the case that the party has formed vigilante groups. It is powerful individuals within the parties that control them. So if you ask the parties, I don't have any vigilante group. The first is the nature of the vigilante groups, and it affects the way in which they operate.
Meanwhile, Professor Jima Boedi, who doubles as the Executive Director of the Center for Democratic Development and CODIO Advisory Board member, says parties have failed to dissolve vigilante groups. According to him, actions of these groups ahead of the 2016 elections created a rather tense atmosphere for Ghanaians and interest groups.
Part of the anxiety arose from the fact that we heard of and saw, in some instances, mobilized armed militants of the various parties, the two main parties, going under various names. And so, and then especially we saw that there had been no serious attempt to curb them.
The main actor in last year's elections, the Electoral Commission, admitted that there were several challenges prior to the polls. These included court battles, intense pressure from political parties, media and other interest groups. Director of Elections Samuel Tete, who represented the Deputy Commissioner Georgina Amankwa, shares some of these challenges.
We had certain challenges with the continuous restriction, pressure on the staff at the visit offices of the Commission, the same power outages which affected smooth processing of applicants. Political parties, as usual, were also mobilizing prospective applicants to the EC offices. And some visit officers had to rely on the police to maintain order, but not without insult and abuses from both applicants and political party officials.
Director of Democracy and Governance Office at USAID, Ghana, Joy Sessi says participants must not dwell too much on the negatives, as this won't help Ghana. Kwame Yaka's report for Joy News.
First Deputy Speaker of Parliament Joseph Wusu is questioning the basis for which government is seeking to divert funds from GET Fund and the NHIS to the Finance Ministry to support what he says are priority projects. Parliament is considering the earmark fund capping and realignment bill, which, when passed, would allow for money from various statutory funds to be capped, so the rest is made available to government. The bill will also allow for MMDAs to send portions of the internally generated funds to the Finance Ministry. Mr. Sewusu raised the issue when Deputy Finance Minister designate Kweku Kwarteng appeared before the Appointment Committee.
The Minister still has the power and the opportunity to top it where that is necessary. That's the first point. You know, this capping was designed to solve a specific problem. It is new. The bill is now before Parliament. As its implementation begins, I am confident that those managing the economy are reasonable people. As they begin to implement these, it will become clear that those agencies that perhaps you mentioned are not in a position to forego their IGF retentions any more than they have done in the past. Those lessons will be learned and then corrections would be done. But we ought to accept that the rigidities that we're seeking to deal with, which has been complained about in the past, is a real problem. And therefore, there was a need for this broad policy. So that's why I'm sure that provision was put in the budget so the minister can correct problems that arise. But going forward, those agencies that will be captured would be revised, and perhaps those that are being considered, because we are now starting, may be taken out. I'm also happy to have heard from the Honourable Minister that the Ministry will be bringing an IGF bill to Parliament to deal with many of the issues that are coming up as a result of this capping policy.
Also appearing before the committee was Abnao Sayasari, who was also vetted for the position of Deputy Finance Minister. She was quizzed on why the NPP government froze the appointment processes for new government staff when it took over power. Her response was that the recruitment had been audited.
Like we said, these are things that we inherited. So we will need to audit all these things before we can open ourselves up to engage these teachers and other workers and the nurses. So I believe that plans are far advanced in auditing these things. And I believe that soon my minister will give the clear guidelines as to how we will implement some of these things.
There were questions about the third Deputy Finance Minister, Charles Edubuahin, possessing dual citizenship when he appeared before the committee.
I've held dual citizenship since it was first allowed under the Kufuor government. And as of last year, December, I started the process to relinquish or renounce my American citizenship. The process entailed 3 counseling sessions with the head of citizen services at the American Embassy, which I've been through. And it culminated in my taking an oath of renunciation, which I did, and I surrendered my passport at that ceremony. So I can say categorically that I'm no longer a citizen of the United States.
Right, so we're going over now to Parliament's Appointments Committee, where we have a Deputy Minister Designate for Energy, presently before the Appointments Committee and ably supported by his 2 wives. Let's listen.
Passing the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, before the disaggregation of the funds, stabilization, heritage, ABFA, best practice was that don't use ABFA other than for capex and capital expenditure. There's a move by this government to use ABFA to fund senior high school. As an expert professional that you are, Schumacher model, are we learning or we are heading towards endangering this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see that minority leader has fallen in love with the Schumacher model. Mr. Chairman, the architecture, the construction of the law on the ABFA is that you should use not more than 70% for capex, and the balance 30% should be used for recurrent spending. In fact, when the budget was presented and the minister indicated part of the ABFA was to be allocated for the free SHS, I went deeply into the figures. First of all, to find out whether there was compliance with the law. And truly, Mr. Chairman, exactly 30% of the ABFA is what has been allocated to the free SHS. And so it really has not affected the 70% which the law requires should be used for capex. So as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Chairman, what the minister did was appropriate. It wasn't in violation.
So today you see no wrong in using ABFA for purpose of consumption. Is that the case?
Mr. Chairman, it has always been the case that 30% of the ABFA was used for consumption, and 70% has always been used for capex. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, since I said, as for Anta, is Tamale boy. If he cries at Jeremiah, it will be my own shame. So, Chairman, be sure that we have to see his weight on the policy issues.
I'm only counting.
And Chairman, you can keep counting. I'm almost done. And Chairman, since the minister is here, we have been hearing you about contracts and the review of contracts and the values of contracts. And in time past, Parliament itself has taken a bite to deepen transparency in the management of petroleum resources. What advice would you have for your minister and for the Republic?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately for us, we have a law that provides for greater transparency in the management of our oil and gas resources. The Petroleum Revenue Management Act 919 already provides for the application of open public tender, open and competitive public tender for acquiring petroleum rights, except that you cannot just go and start doing open and competitive bidding, because the law also requires regulations to be enacted to give effect to the broader provision in Section 10 of the law. And so I will encourage my minister, I will support him to take the steps to develop the regulations to ensure that Ghana begins the application of open and competitive public tender. The second one is...
Will you support the open auction of oil blocks as a way of deepening transparency within the petroleum environment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So there was the Deputy Energy Minister designate Mohammed Amin Adam before Parliament's Appointments Committee. You're watching Joy News Prime. We're taking a break, but still to come, former President Mahama begins tour of universities with his book, My First Coup d'etat.
Different people have different opinions about Nkrumah, but I mean, certainly one thing we can't run away from is that he's the founder of our nation.
We're back with all that and more. Stay tuned. The chief warlord of the Ghana State, Captain Inseni Ni Mankata IV, is giving the kingmakers of the Ghana State a one-month ultimatum to outdoor the legitimate king of the state. This, he says, is to help bring back the lost glory of the Ghans and also restore some sanity to the Ghana Traditional Council. He says failure to comply with the demand will lead to the warlords turning their guns on the kingmakers.
Within a shortest time, I urge the four ruling houses which made the kingmakers of the Ghana State to give me and my Asafwachem and Asafwacheme and the Ghana State, the Gamanche, within a month. They should let me know the Gamanche I'm going to work with. I cannot be in my palace every day. I cannot call myself Asafwache without a manche, a Gamanche. That is why I have invited you here this morning to let the public, each and everyone who matters in the Ghana State, to hear what I am saying. I said I need Gamanche within 1 month from now. If they don't do so, I and my Asafwachem and Asafwacheme will bring fire to them. The fire which I sent to the Angunas and the Ashantis, I will give it back to them. So I urge them within now and the ending of April, I want to see Gamanche.
Several persons have laid claim to the Gamanche throne in recent years, especially since the passing of Niamugi II in 2007. This, Asafwache Ni Mankata says, is the doing of politicians who, he says, use money to influence them for political gain and warn them to desist from the practice.
Money has come to stay and play a major role in our institution. Politicians now tell us who should be the Gamanche and who is the Gamanche and who they recognize. The politicians cannot recognize anybody who has not gone through customary rights to be called Gamanche, to be invited to state programs because it's their favor or is their man. Politicians cannot choose a Gamanche for us. I don't get myself out of it. I was one time a politician, a parliamentary candidate, but today I speak as Asafwache, the warrior king, to lead my people to the promised land. I don't fear, and I will say it again, politicians to get out from our institution.
Residents of Jita in the Volta region have taken to the streets to protest against some killings in the community. In a petition to the police, the worried residents demanded that security agencies investigate the deaths and act swiftly to prevent the further loss of life. They say the situation is getting out of hand and something needs to be done urgently. Residents have over the years discovered mutilated bodies allegedly killed by unknown persons. According to the residents, between 2013 and 2017, over 10 residents, including 3 children, were killed with certain body parts removed and left in similar state. The residents say they want the mystery resolved as soon as possible because most residents are living in fear.
We are pleading with you, whatever it takes to bring out perpetrators of these activities to book, let us do so. And it must must be done now because our people are hungry. Now those of us who live outside the country, outside this community, have to send them remittances before they can feed, because they can no longer go to farm, they can no longer go to hill firewood, they can no longer go to, how do we call it, fishing. No, it cannot be. So this thing must stop so that economic activities shall resume in the community for us to continue to live our life.
The Justice of the Supreme Court, His Lordship Justice Jones Doche, wants technical universities to consider ways to upgrade the knowledge of local artisans who have not had the benefit of formal education. This, he believes, will significantly boost the country's industrial sector, as such training would enhance their productivity. Justice Doche made the assertion at the maiden edition of the Afeti Voji lecture at the Ho Technical University in the Volta region.
The Afeti Voji lecture was instituted to celebrate and honor Dr. George Afeti and the late James Yaovi Voji for their roles in the transition of Ho Polytechnic, now Ho Technical University, into a tertiary institution. The late James Yao Voji was the principal of the then Ho Technical Institute. It was during his tenure that the institute was transited into Ho Polytechnic, after which Dr. George Afeti took over as the foundation principal and completed the transition process of the institution into a proper tertiary institution. Delivering the maiden lecture, Justice Jones Doche charged Ho Technical University to set the pace and transfer theological support to practical industrial craftsmen and artisans in the Volta region. This, he said, will make theory complement practice and vice versa to facilitate development of the country. Justice Doche also proposed the establishment of an endowment fund for Ho Technical University to support research and practical works of the institution.
The above aims of a technical university therefore fit into my opinion that theory informs practice and practice reinforces theory. I also wish to urge the various entrepreneurs from the region, especially in industry, agriculture, hospitality, transportation, both oil knowledge, oil marketing, etc., just to mention a few, to seriously consider setting up an endowment fund for the whole technical university to support practical scientific research into their fields of operation.
Minister for Education Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh has challenged the Ghana Education Service to show evidence of the impact of government's investment in the sector with improved performance of students in examinations. Dr. Prempeh on Tuesday opened the maiden Ghana Education Evidence Summit, seeking to bring together researchers to present findings on ways to improve the quality of education. There is more in this report.
The summit brought together educational experts from across the country as well as beyond. Papers were presented on various aspects of education in the country. Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, Professor Joseph Ampia, delivered a paper on the theme, using evidence to achieve better learning outcomes. Professor Ampia believes government must direct research through provision of funds and setting parameters for researchers.
The individual researchers will do their own research based on their own sources of funds and will use that to satisfy their interests as well as national interests. But for policy making and for practice at the national level, we need funding from government. So when you provide the money, you dictate what has to be done for you. But if you don't provide the money, the person dictates what he thinks he wants to research into.
Minister for Education Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh underscored the importance of research and challenged the Ghana Education Service to ensure the government's investment in the sector reaps dividends.
The government is resolved to support the Ghana Education Service to deal with these challenges by increasing teacher motivation and resource education, certainly to improve learning outcomes in Ghanaian schools. It is not only teacher motivation and resource allocation that matters. Ghana Education Service must reinvent itself to be accountable to the general populace that what we have done this year, this is what we have achieved. I want a Ghana Education Service that is going to tell us we took these number of Ghanaian children through this examination, this is the pass rate this year, and show consistently serious increase in the pass rates, and better pass rates, not C6s. That doesn't take you anywhere.
The Ghana Education Service has responded positively to the challenge, pledging to show results. Reverend Jonathan Bethe is the PRO of the service.
If government has invested money into education, he expects good results. So if he's asking for accountability on that aspect, he's very right, and Ghana Education Service is right and ready to render account to him.
The summit continues on Wednesday.
Watching Joy News Prime, we're taking a break, but still to come. Former President Mahama begins tour of universities with his book, My First Coup d'etat, and shares fondly a story about one Alice who he used to admire back in the day.
Fully absorbed in the game. My eyes were keenly on the ball. I looked up for an instant, almost instinctively, and I saw this girl. She was beautiful.
And that's all about Alice. Stay tuned for that.
Hello, great to have you with you again on Business, and my name is Emmanuel Boaji-Riafi. Coming up, government has reiterated its resolve to provide support for indigenous industries and companies in the country. Minister for Business Development Ibrahim Mohammed Awal emphasized this is the beginning of initiatives by his administration to strengthen the country's economy beyond ordinary tax cuts. He made the remarks when interacting with some officials of Melcom Ghana after a courtesy call on him in Accra. Ebenezer Sabute was there.
The current government has so far been keen on providing support to private sector businesses in order to expand their operations and generate employment for citizens. This has further been highlighted by the Minister of Business Development, Ibrahim Mohammed Awal, during an interaction with officials of the Melcom Group of companies after a courtesy call on him in Accra. He urged the company to consider opening branches in more district capitals of the country.
Can I also urge you to look at some district capitals? They are very viable and help improve the capacity of the districts.
We are always open to suggestions. We are always on the lookout for opportunities. So, yes.
We could help you sort that if there are any issues, regulatory issues, so that if you have to give us at least some 40 districts more. We have 36 now. If we target another 40 districts over the next few years, government could support you with some. So it could help improve the job conditions in those districts. We can work together and get this done. I think it's a good initiative. We need to look at the model. It's very interesting. I think I can replicate it. Like you said, we want to help the micro, small businesses. If we have to get your model that we can replicate to those lower there, I'm sure that will help us expand the businesses very fast. We want to expand.
The visit was used to highlight operations of the retail outlet while outlining some challenges faced by the company in its operating environment. Mahesh Milwani is a joint managing director of Melcom.
He was very, very responsive, and he said he'll definitely follow up on all our suggestions. He listened to all our issues that we have with land issues and port issues and clearing issues and the fees and the charges that are being charged. So he was very appreciative of our comments, and he says he will definitely look into them, and we will review again everything after maybe 2 to 3 months down the line to see how far they've reached. And he said definitely by the end of the year you'll see a lot of improvements.
What about the suggestion the minister raised that people should consider the district capitals in opening some of your branches as well?
I told him it's a very good, very good suggestion, and to please let us know which places, and if we find them viable, we definitely look into them.
Okay, so when are we going to look at you giving out a blueprint on this?
Sure, in the coming weeks, I'm sure.
This forms part of series of engagements expected to be carried out by the Business Development Minister in the future.
Meanwhile, budding businesses would from next year be relieved of tax payments for at least 1 year. This, according to government, is part of plans to encourage the establishment of new businesses to drive its job creation agenda and also economic growth. The Minister for Investment and Business Development, Ibrahim Mohammed Awal, revealed this to Joy Business at a breakfast meeting organized by the India High Commission and the World Trade Center here in Accra.
The tax break should offer some respite to especially startups that reportedly find it hard to survive beyond the first year due to operational and financial challenges. The Minister for Investment and Business Development, Ibrahim Mohammed Awal, said beneficiary entrepreneurs would be expected to plow back the savings made into their businesses for growth.
The government plans to have a one-year regulatory tax breaks for startups. Very important. We want to have a one-year regulatory break for startups. We don't want them to just start, we want them to endure. Out of every 100 companies that start in this country, about 8 of them collapse before they get to 5 years. It's not good for us. And out of that, we have a very big 80%, 90% SMEs, and then we don't have the middle, what we call the missing middle. We don't have a middle big companies in this country. You have very small ones that are not formalized. It's difficult to even tax them. So again, one initiative that government has put in place is to ensure that there is a clear identification system. We are starting this year, and then we hope to cover every Ghanaian within 2 years. We want to remove all the bottlenecks to business, and I want you to support us in that. We've set up, this is at the Ministry of Business Development, to elicit complaints to be sure how we can remove all the bottlenecks to business. We cannot do it alone. We are a government that believes that the government's work is to create the framework, and the private sector must come in and develop. We are going to be conscious on that, and we are going to focus on this area.
On his part, the Indian High Commissioner to Ghana, Birender Singh, praised the new government's drive to stimulate business growth, which he says makes it more crucial for the two countries to deepen trade and investment ties.
India and Ghana enjoy a very robust bilateral relationship. The seeds were sown even before the independence of both the countries, and the relationship has been further nurtured by the successive leadership of both the countries. And we are very happy that India is one of the strong developmental partners of Ghana. Our developmental partnership has already crossed $500 million mark, and recently we had signed $398.33 million bias credit agreement, under which railway line would be laid down from Tema to Akosombo. We also signed a sugarcane cultivation concession line of credit, which would be helpful in making the Kominda sugar factory a commercially viable option. The government of India has approved a $150 million line of credit for agriculture mechanization, and I think the Ghanaian government is working on obtaining the necessary approvals.
The breakfast meeting was organized under the theme Promoting India-Ghana Business Relations through Trade and Investment.
CEO of insurance firm Hollard has indicated the country's quest to increase insurance penetration can be largely achieved if efforts are made to provide financial education to informal sector workers. Linda Udru spoke to Joy Business at the start of Hollard's Streetwise Finance Initiative.
About 70% of Ghana's population do not have access to various financial services, as majority of them are in the informal sector. Streetwise Finance, an initiative of Hollard Ghana, is aimed at helping informal sector workers manage their finances and become financially literate. CEO of Hollard Ghana, Linda Udru, believes the high rate of financial exclusion is also contributing to the slow pace of insurance penetration in the country.
So, for instance, we all bemoan the fact that insurance has less than 2% penetration in the market, and that is to be expected because most of our people are outside the financial services. So till we bring everybody on board, we are not going to be able to make the target that we've set for ourselves. So it's incumbent upon all people to be able to pull the rest of our population into financial services. And the sure way to do that is to give them empowerment. And how do you empower people? Is when you have educated them, then they have that empowerment to move forward.
The Ghana Association of Garment Makers is the first group to benefit from Hollard Ghana's Streetwise Finance Initiative. President of the association, David Setchofia, shares how beneficial the training would be for them.
In terms of skill development, we are lack. We need a skill development exercises. Also, in a managerial terms, to manage our various shops. I think these are the challenges that we are having.
Okay. So how do you think that this initiative that Holland Insurance has started will help you? Because I get the impression that most of your members are not even hooked onto any insurance products. Is that the case?
Yeah, this is a classic step that Holland is taking so that we can be able to know much about insurance policies. That will enable also secure our future.
Meanwhile, Holland Ghana has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Accra Technical University to bridge the gap between academia and the insurance industry. Vice Chancellor of the University, Sylvester Achio, lauds the move.
The survey has been done long ago, and we've had a lot of stakeholders meetings, and we came out with objectives that there is the need for the technical institutions, including the universities, to partner with industry. Try to get certain things done based on identified challenges within the various communities. So with this collaboration with them, we will intensify this, and it will be fruitful.
South Africa's second biggest non-life insurer, Holland, began operations last year after entering the Ghanaian market through a 51% acquisition of Metropolitan Insurance Company Limited.
And that's all in business for tonight. Many thanks for watching. For more business news, log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Good evening.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair is advocating for the breaking down of trade barriers between African and Western markets. According to Mr. Blair, this is what needs to be done to level the playing field in trade on the global market, adding what is left is the will to implement this policy, which will strengthen African economies in the area of trade. Speaking at a news briefing under the auspices of the Institute of Economic Affairs, he also noted that the ultimate success of African countries lies in the hands of Africa.
The Ghanaian people are respected people. This country has huge potential. It's got resources that it can develop and exploit. And what is necessary is that it sets the country on the right path now to take the difficult decisions and to improve the lives of people. And if we can help from the governance initiative in any way with that process, we will. But I'm very confident about Ghana. I think the Ghanaian people should be confident about the country. And right now is the moment for understanding that potential and developing it, and knowing that whatever the challenges, there is a genuine opportunity if the correct decisions are taken and the right focus is there. Aid is important, and as I say, when I was Prime Minister, we trebled aid. But today you can learn the lessons of good governance from around the world. For example, if you're trying to bring in investment, you need a minimum of bureaucracy, you need transparent rules, you need to make sure that you're fighting things like corruption, you need to make sure that you're developing the infrastructure so that business can come in. These are lessons that around the world where they're applied, countries succeed. And yes, of course, you've got to open up Western markets as well. And actually, Britain, which is still part of the European Union as we speak, we have been advocating within Europe a much more open approach to African trade. So yes, of course, you need to knock down those trade barriers with the West, but by the way, you also need to knock down some of the trade barriers, tariff and non-tariff, between the neighboring countries. There's so much more that could be done in the trade that goes across this part of Africa. So all of these things, what I'm saying is we kind of know what we should do. The challenge is doing it. And whatever sector you're talking about, industrialization, the power sector, agriculture, the great thing is to learn the best lessons from around the world, what's working, what's not.
Now, former President John Dramani Mahama has revealed he almost quit politics to go into private business in 2008, but had to stay in public service because the NDC and late President Mills won the presidential elections that year. The former president made that revelation at the first official reading of his first book, My First Coup d'etat, at the University of Ghana here in Accra. He, however, declined to comment about his future political ambitions when Joy News' Latif Idrisu asked him if he has abandoned politics to concentrate on writing books. The former president, however, hinted that he is working on a second book, but will not tell when it will be completed. My First Coup d'etat, according to the former president, is also published in Portuguese.
My dad started as a teacher, and I always thank God for who I am, because I'm what I am by a fate of accident. In this story, you see the district commissioner's hat and how my dad ended up going to school because he was standing outside his grandfather's palace. His grandfather was the chief, and he had a big navel. And the district commissioner was passing, and he squeezed my father's navel. And of course, it's painful. And so my father lashed out, and the district commissioner's hat fell. And so he picked it and took a look at the boy, cleaned his hat, and he went into my grandfather's hat. And so on the day, they came and took the boy away and sent him to school. And that's how he became educated. So he left politics and went into business and was very successful in business. And so that had been my intention in 2008. I thought I was leaving politics and also going into the private sector. But like I said, God guides our steps, and I am where I am today.
The former president also weighed in on the debate about who the real founder of Ghana is.
Different people have different opinions about Nkrumah, but I mean, certainly one thing we can't run away from is that he's the founder of our nation. He led the independence struggle. Many people contributed, and it happens in Christianity. There's John the Baptist, there's all the apostles and everybody, but who is the champion of Christianity? Jesus Christ. So we don't undermine the role other people played. Sergeant Ajete, all of them, everybody played a role. My dad and co were the organizers in the northern parts, and sang heroes, going from town to town, organizing, the people and agitating them. But you cannot recognize all those who took part. There's that person who gave the critical spark that eventually led to independence, and you cannot run away from it. There's Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So that's it. And for me, Nkrumah is a hero. And I believe that one of the things he tried to do was to build the infrastructure of this country and use it as a platform to industrialize the country. I believe that his vision was far ahead of the country itself. And so most of us didn't understand what he was trying to do. But today, when we look back, we can see, what he was trying to make of this country.
Now, reading from his book, My First Coup d'etat, the president talked about one Alice, who he admired back in the day.
I remember is that I was fully absorbed in the game. My eyes were keenly on the ball. I looked up for an instant, almost instinctively, and I saw this girl. She was beautiful. She was slender and dark-skinned. Everything about her glowed as though she were walking in her own spotlight. I tried to turn my attention quickly back to the game, but I couldn't. I felt funny, as if I were underwater, moving, but without precision. When my brother kicked the ball to me, I rushed to meet it, but I couldn't get there fast enough. I ended up fumbling and falling and giving way to somebody on the other team to take possession. But what's your problem? Alfred asked me. That was a clear pass to you. It was yours.
Vice President Dr. Mamadou Bawumia has assured the Ghana Navy government will continue to protect the country's offshore assets and the fishing industry by investing heavily in both material and human resources, even as the threat to the sector in the Gulf of Guinea continues. The Vice President also added that oil discoveries in several mobile drilling units ongoing offshore make Ghana's maritime domain a critical national asset with its attendant vulnerabilities. Dr. Mahama Dubamia said this when he delivered a keynote speech at the 3rd edition of the Coastal and Maritime Surveillance Africa Conference at the International Conference Center here in Accra.
Maritime security is a collaborative effort involving many other agencies and neighboring countries, since there are no physical boundaries at sea. Efforts are underway to equip other agencies, such as the Marine Police, the Attorney General's Department, and the Judiciary, to be able to effectively prosecute maritime offenses. These are all indications of our government's commitment to maritime security to protect not only our offshore assets, but also our fishing industry and external trade. I therefore charge the service chiefs to work closely with their counterparts in the region to assess the products and solutions to be exhibited here with the aim to identify regional solutions. I am happy to see the presence of some of our great international allies from the USA, Europe, and other parts of the world. We thank you for your commitment to our cause.
The Ghana National Petroleum Corporation is urging Ghanaians, especially residents living in rich resource communities, to equip themselves with the necessary skills to enable them benefit adequately from the oil and gas industry. At a 2-day advocacy program as oil and gas exploration activities take place in the Keta Lagoon, it said the introduction of the Local Content Law LI 2204 gives backing to more local participation, hence the need for residents to take advantage. Fred Kwame Asari's report.
The advocacy program was to engage stakeholders and community members to enlighten them on the prospects of the oil and gas industry and its accompanying job opportunities. The Contract and Procurement Administrator at the Local Content Department of GNPC, Agatha Eno Ama, who educated participants on the local content law, asserted the introduction of the law was to enable Ghanaians benefit adequately from industries in their areas.
When there's discovery of oil, one always thinks that there has to be employment within the locality. That is very true. But then we lack the expertise, we lack the capabilities, we lack the resources in place. And the government thought it wise to put together the Local Content LI 2204 to ensure that we can train, we can bring out qualified people to be able to benefit from the industry.
A geophysicist at the GNPC implored residents around the Keta Lagoon to exercise patience, since benefit from the oil and gas exploration would take some time to manifest. He urged communities to cooperate with companies that would embark on the oil exploration works in the Keta Lagoon. He also proposed the leasing of lands to companies instead of selling them. The paramount chief of Abo traditional area, Togbi Dojiavuji Atrinfu II, was optimistic oil would be found in commercial quantities in the Keta Lagoon and advised the youth to acquire the needed training so they can be employed in the sector. Fred Kwame Asari's report for Joy News.
Now, President Akufo-Addo only this week advised at an international conference on entrepreneurship and the business development that though prayers and miracles are good, hard work guarantees success. That advice probably hasn't quite gotten down to the many Christians who prefer to chase after prophecies and miracles during the working week than working a trade or putting in some hours at work. Now, joining us, Maxwell Agwagwa has been trying to understand what it is that is keeping many Christians in church well after the regular Sunday service.
Weekdays are typically working days in most countries around the world, including Ghana. But while some get busy with work, others prefer to devote a bit more time to their religion, often in the hope of a miracle or for answers to their prayers.
So it is worship time here at the Fifth Way International Ministries. It is a weekday, but these worshippers inside here are bringing forth to their Maker their own supplications. It is their hope that God will make a timely intervention in their life.
Inside the church, this woman lies on the floor in worship of her Maker. A lot of them here have transcended the spiritual realm. As a way of preventing members who arrive late from distracting other worshippers, the gates are locked during the session. This middle-aged woman would, however, not allow the locked doors frustrate her quest to worship and simply kneels and cries out to the heavens. George Boateng is a member of the church. As a video editor, he believes life is transient, hence the need to fight for his salvation. George continues to hope that his devotion to the work of God is what will bring him his breakthrough.
I believe that life is very short, and as human beings, you don't know when you'll be called. God can call you at any given time. Have you thought about that? When God calls you right now, what are you going to tell him? Are you really prepared? Where are you going? Where exactly are you going? The Bible says that we should work on our salvation with great fear and trembling. So for me, the little chance I will get, I have to use to serve God. And it is true that Tuesday is a normal working hours, that you know. But Proverbs has made me understand that it is not your hard work that will make you make it in life. No, it is when God blesses you. Working on my salvation, which is very, very important.
Unlike George Boateng, this man in his late 50s is not really keen about salvation. In an off-record conversation, he says, but for his ailment, he will not be at church on a weekday. He's here today to be healed. Resident pastor of the Fifth Way International Ministries, Pastor Samuel Nyakun, believes some problems cannot be solved by mere mortals. Pastor Nyakun says he entreats his congregation to turn to God for a solution to their problems.
What people don't normally understand is the spiritual side of life. Normally people have what we think they are okay, but spiritually they might have a lot of problems. So normally the problem, is the content of the problem, how the problem is, that drives them to the church. Some of them, you might see maybe they are working okay, and you might think maybe because of the way they shouldn't come to church. But probably the problem that the person might having is even bigger than the problem. And looking for the solution, you can't tell the person to sometimes not to be at church. The person decided to go to church because of the problem. That's why I believe many people go to church on weekdays, because basically it's the problem. Normally it's the problem, that the spiritual problem that a physical man cannot solve.
Psychology lecturer at the University of Ghana, Mr. Imanonibo Ekwashi, says many tend to find solace in religion.
Generally, you find people going through socio-economic hardships, and it is believed that when you engage in religious activities, you end up receiving some relief to these harsh realities. I mean, those economic realities that you're going through, which are quite difficult to manage. So you are in the church, you're praying, and you're casting all your burdens onto God because He cares for you. Now, it gives you that psychological relief, or that mental state where you believe that indeed whatever problems you're going through are now pushed onto God, and He's going to take care of that.
He explains the relief people find in participating in church activity is not only imagined but real.
It's clear in the psychological literature that when people engage in physical activities, including dancing or the exercises you think about, endorphins are released into your system, and they are associated with happiness, you know, your general overview on life. It tends to make you happy, you know, and again, it boosts your immune system. So clearly, dancing and singing, it has its own psychological, if you like, positive effects on the person. But on the economic side, really I can't tell. But from where I sit or I stand, I see perhaps the church is gaining more because people coming to church are going to, you know, give offertory, tithes, and so on. So clearly the benefit, I don't know, but perhaps goes to one side instead of the general congregation. It depends on what policies the church, a particular church in question may have, you know, in terms of the distribution of these forms of income to the church. Otherwise, I think that economically people really don't gain. I mean, physically, you go to church and you don't bring back money from the church, but people believe that God in his own way will bless you. When you go to church, partake in all of these activities, engage in these spiritual activities, you come back to your workplace and you have more clientele trooping into your shop to buy or patronize your services. These are beliefs that people have.
Wow. Interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Lido. So the president may have advocated for a fine balance between casting one's burdens on God and also working hard to make ends meet. But perhaps the opium of religion will continue to serve the masses.